week we actually saw it. Let's get your reaction. What is your take about finally the decision to bring this bill amidst all the discussions that you've followed about it?
You know, in the legal profession, Kenneth, when you're in the presence of those senior to you, they speak fast. So I don't know if you're making me be discourteous to my senior colleagues here. On matters of law, they take precedence. But with their indulgence, with their indulgence, I think a couple of things must be noted here. First, that the amendment of the UPDF Act was first proposed in a bill that was tabled in 2014, so in 2024. The Minister of Defense and Veteran Affairs, a lawyer, by the way, Jacob Oboth, had tabled that law, seeking to amend several provisions of the UPDF Act. That would have been, I think, the fourth proposed amendment to the Act. But that process was stopped following the decision of the Supreme Court. And they went back to the drawing board to incorporate the recommendations and orders of the Supreme Court in what they thought would be a comprehensive bill. So this bill really is a two-part bill, the initial bill that was drafted before, and then with the addition that was then added following the Supreme Court judgment. It is also important to say the first bill had not been discussed. It had only been gazetted. The public had not been summoned to discuss it. The public, it was not even on the order paper, but it had been gazetted. Leave had been granted for the minister to bring the bill, and the bill was drafted and gazetted. And that's where the bill had stopped. There were no discussions in Parliament or indeed by the public on the content of that bill. Now, the bill that they have introduced has really very good provisions in some respects. And I think it is important to note that there are some things in this bill that are difficult to even argue against. For instance, the bill seeks to provide for a right to healthcare as a right for serving military officers, and provides for a elaborate procedure on how somebody can access healthcare, both in the country but also outside the country when they're injured in the course of their service. For ordinary men and women of the UPDF who sacrifice their life to serve in the armed forces, this is a progressive proposal that should be applauded. The bill provides for pensions of men and women who serve in the armed forces, and proposes to decentralize the pension scheme for members of the armed forces from the public service pension scheme to the Ministry of Defense. In other words, the argument, I think, is that the public service does not recruit soldiers, does not discipline soldiers, does not pay soldiers. Why would they then control their pension? So the pension is being taken back to the army so that they can manage their own pensions. That's a proposal you cannot argue against. I think it's a good proposal. The proposal deals with disability, people who have been disabled or suffered infirmity because of their service. Anybody who has gone to Mobende, which is the disability unit of the armed forces, would be driven to tears to see just how those people have been abandoned, the way they are being treated. And this law, there are clauses of the bill that proposes ways to deal with people who have suffered disability while in the service of the armed forces. The fourth thing that it does is seeks to provide a legal basis for what has otherwise been an illegal unit of the UPDF, the SFC. In the structure of the UPDF, as provided for in the Defense White Paper, following the defense reforms and into the new UPDF law in 2005, didn't have anything called the SFC. And yet the SFC over time has become an overbearing presence in the UPDF services and in the country as a whole. The bill now proposes to create a command called the SFC, and give it legal cover. In that respect, they are curing what was an illegality, right? But be that as it may, the controversial part of the bill are the half-hearted, dishonest attempts to incorporate the directive recommendations of the Supreme Court and the orders of the Supreme Court in respect of the reform military justice system in the country. A couple of things is important to note. The Supreme Court, at page 142 of their judgment, held that as a general rule, the ordinary courts should try all criminal cases of both soldiers and civilians. Okay? That creating a parallel and competing jurisdiction over a similar offense is a violation of due process. Okay? If a soldier is caught stealing, why would the soldier go before a military court for trial for theft? If a soldier is caught committing an act of rape. So the court said, as a general rule, the ordinary courts must be empowered to try all cases of criminal nature. In fact, the court says even further that at page 148 to 149, it says that you must strengthen the ordinary courts and not seek to bypass it. Okay? That's a powerful state. Strengthen the ordinary courts, don't seek to bypass it. In specific reference to civilians, the court, citing international standards, says that trials of civilians in the military court should be in rare and exceptional circumstances. Okay? Now, rare and exceptional circumstances are circumstances out of the ordinary. And the court gives an example that if a unit of the armed forces operating in an area where the Ugandan ordinary courts don't have jurisdiction, and a crime is committed in that place by a person who is either next to serving with the armed forces, then the army court can try that person, because the ordinary courts don't have jurisdiction.
That would be a field court martial.
No. Not field court martial. Say a unit of the UPDF is deployed now in Congo,
Somalia.
fighting in Somalia. If a crime is committed while that person is in Somalia, okay, the Ugandan courts don't have territorial jurisdiction over that place. In those cases, the military court could try a civilian. That's the example that the Supreme Court gave. The third thing the Supreme Court did was to say, while Parliament had the powers to create a military court, that military court was for military discipline, right? It was intended for military discipline. Okay? But the court went further to say, in the way the court was then structured and formed, it was incapable of providing due process guarantees for anybody who appeared before it. Because the people who are serving on the court don't have qualifications. You have ordinary people purporting to interpret the law, and in some cases, even handing down death sentences. And the court says that is not constitutional. So the court nullified a lot of sections of the law. Now, what do they do in the proposal that, in my view, is contrary to what the Supreme Court has said? One, they purport to create, they import the language of the court of exceptional circumstances and highlight in clause 30, which seeks to amend Article 117, in particular, introducing a new clause of 117A under the title, other persons subject to military law. Okay? But the circumstances they claim are exceptional, are in fact not exceptional circumstances by whatever stretch of imagination, except one or two of them. Okay? For instance, if any person is found in unlawful possession of arms that are, or items that are equipped, that are an ordinary monopoly of the army, that person is subject to military law. They go ahead to list in Schedule A, Schedule 7A and Schedule 7B the items they claim are the ordinary monopoly of the armed forces. They include a pistol. Now we know a pistol is not an ordinary
Monopoly.
preserve of the armed forces. I can license a pistol under the Firearms Act. Okay, they go ahead and include things like ammonium nitrate. It's a scientific term, but every chemistry laboratory in this country has ammonium nitrate. In fact, serious commercial agricultural farms use ammonium nitrate
For fertilizers.
Stone quarries that do blasting of stones to break them into smaller pieces use ammonium nitrate. This is not a preserve of the armed forces. It's even more ridiculous when if you go to the description of dress codes, dresses. Those of you who like Kaunda suits, a Kaunda suit is now a preserve of the UPDF if they have the following colors: coffee brown, sky blue. They put a picture of the colors, and it's really, so in SKD 7B clause 3, Kaunda suits. Kaunda suit uniform is an office working dress for the defense forces as shown in picture 3, and they describe the detail. The jacket is olive green for land forces, sky blue for air forces, coffee brown for special forces command. There is no description of insignia in the Kaunda suit. So any Kaunda suit now of that color is a preserve of the UPDF. So the circumstances that they seek to provide, and they claim is exceptional circumstances, is by no means an exceptional circumstance warranting the trial of a civilian before a military court. Okay? They even go ahead and say any person accompanying a unit of the armed forces, okay, if you're a member of the household, okay, let's say if a witch was still in service, his brother is staying with him, his wife, his children, his relatives, that person becomes a subject to military law. They even, in fact, what is even more ridiculous is that in the way the person is being tried, the person will assume a rank. Okay, they will give you a rank, and I'm trying to.
You're not a serving officer.
Yes,
Private.
yes. They give you a rank, and for the purposes of that section, try you as though you were a member of the UPDF. It says a person referred to in subsection 1A, while accompanying a unit or other elements of the defense forces, is alleged to have committed a service offense, shall, for the purposes of this act, be treated as if he or she were a militant of the rank of a private. Okay? This is not the spirit and the wording of the ruling of the Supreme Court. In that respect, therefore, I think that the proposed clauses in respect to the reform of the military justice system, while it provides some progressive things such as the qualifications for chairpersons of the different units of the armed forces courts, fall far short in large parts in as far as they seek to contradict the decision of the Supreme Court. Now, 2 quick points. First, it would be contemptuous of Parliament to pass these clauses the way they are. Contemptuous of the Supreme Court. They would be unconstitutional because they would violate the provisions of Article 92 of the Constitution. Article 92 of the Constitution provides that Parliament cannot pass a law to vary a judgment of the courts in respect of parties to the suit. The AG was a party, the state was a party to this, in fact was the appellant, lost this case in the Supreme Court. To pass it this way would be unconstitutional, would be a contempt of Parliament, as contempt of the Supreme Court. The last point to make in that regard, just before I can let my friends have their take, is to say there has been a conflation of administrative functions, quasi-judicial administrative functions of certain government entities, and say, but you have a tax appeals tribunal, you have a police court. Why can't the army have their court? Really, these quasi-judicial powers are intended for administrative purposes and discipline. The tax appeal tribunal doesn't send a tax defaulter to jail. They don't. The police disciplinary court does not send anyone to jail. They deal with internal discipline. And I think that we should comply with the decision of the Supreme Court and say that trials in ordinary cases where the Ugandan courts have jurisdiction, whether it is for civilian or for member of the public, should be done by the competent court, namely the High Court.
Spectrum Extra on Radio 1 FM 90. Let's go for a break now. Mr. Nicholas Opiyo has given us a very good foundation. So when we return from the break, the other panelists will be also sharing their opinion on this particular issue, and we make sense of this UPDF Amendment Bill 2025. Keep your comments coming via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. Spectrum Extra continues after this break.